I remember the exact time, 8:12 a.m., a Monday, not because it was important to anyone else, but because that was the moment I stopped being the easy one. That was the moment everything changed. I sat at my kitchen island, my laptop open, coffee untouched, cold. The city outside my window was already alive, cars moving, people rushing, life continuing like nothing was about to break. But inside that condo, everything had already shifted. One by one, I locked them out: savings account, primary checking, brokerage portfolio, even the small secondary account I had opened months ago, the one labeled wedding expenses. Especially that one. I changed every password, not rushed, not emotional, precise, calculated, like I had rehearsed it 100 times in my head before ever touching the keyboard. Multi-factor authentication enabled, external wallets revoked. Shared access terminated. Every single digital door they had quietly walked through for months I closed, and I didn't hesitate, because hesitation was how this started. By 9:30 a.m. my phone started buzzing. At first just notifications, failed transactions, declined transfers, access denied alerts, then calls, one after another: Victoria, Ethan, Victoria again, then my mother, then my father. I watched the screen light up over and over again, and I didn't answer, not one, because for the first time in 18 months I wasn't reacting, I was in control. By 11:43 the pounding started, not on my phone. On my door, loud, urgent, angry, the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission, it demands it. I didn't rush to open it. I finished my coffee first. Cold, bitter, appropriate. When I finally opened the door, Victoria was already mid-sentence. "You ruined my wedding?" Her voice cracked through the hallway before I could even step back. Her engagement ring caught the light, sharp, blinding, almost aggressive. Behind her, Ethan stood still, too still, not shocked, not confused. Calculating, and behind them my parents, breathless, upset, like they had rushed over to fix something they still didn't understand. I didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't explain, I just walked back inside, slowly, calmly. Like I wasn't the one being accused. The stack of papers was already waiting on the table. 67 pages, printed, highlighted, organized, every transaction, every withdrawal. Every silent decision made behind my back, now sitting in black and white. I picked it up and dropped it in front of them, hard enough to echo, $120,000. The number didn't need volume. It carried its own weight, silence, the kind that doesn't calm a room, it exposes it. Victoria flipped through the pages first, fast, too fast, like speed could somehow change what she was seeing. "This isn't what it looks like, then explain it." My voice didn't rise, didn't shake. That scared her more, because for the first time I wasn't playing my role. Ethan stepped forward, controlled, measured. "You froze accounts during active transactions," he said. "That's reckless." Reckless, I almost smiled. Reckless was moving into someone else's home and turning it into your own. Reckless was treating access like ownership. Reckless was thinking I wouldn't notice. "I understand documentation," I said, and then I tapped the first highlighted line. "Explain this." Emerald Coast Consulting, $12,000. A company that didn't exist anywhere except my bank statements. Ethan didn't answer. Victoria didn't look at him. That told me everything. And this? Another page, crypto transfers, 2:14 a.m. $7,500, then another, and another. "It was an investment," Ethan snapped. There it was, not denial, justification. I leaned back slightly, watched them carefully. "I didn't authorize investments." My father finally spoke. "This can't be right." But he wasn't asking, he was hoping. "It is," I said. 18 months, $120,000. And then Victoria said it. The one thing she always said when she had nothing else left. "You're just jealous." The word hung in the air. Familiar, predictable, almost comforting in how expected it was. I looked at her, really looked this time, not as my sister. Not as the golden child, but as someone I finally understood. "Jealous of what?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer because we both knew. She had always been the one who could make mistakes and still be celebrated. The one whose chaos was called passion, whose irresponsibility was called creativity. And me, I was the stable one, the reliable one. The one who fixed things, paid for things, absorbed things until now. "Weddings are expensive," Ethan added, trying to regain control. "We were consolidating expenses. So are forged signatures." Silence. Again, but this time it wasn't confusion, it was fear. I pulled out another document, placed it gently on top of the stack. Different paper, different weight, power of attorney draft, my name at the top. A signature at the bottom, not mine. My mother inhaled sharply. My father's hand froze midair. Victoria went pale. That was precautionary, she said quickly, too quickly. Precautionary for what? You've been stressed in case I became unstable. I finished it for her. And just like that, everything clicked, not just the money. Not just the transfers, not just the lies, the narrative, the comments about my stress, the jokes about burnout, the concern, the subtle, constant framing. It wasn't random. It was preparation. They weren't just spending my money. They were building a case. And for the first time, I wasn't the last one to understand what was happening. I was the only one in the room who finally did. I looked at all of them. My sister, her fiancé, my parents. And I said the one thing none of them expected. You have 30 days. The room shifted. To repay everything? My father's expression hardened. You're choosing money over family? I shook my head slowly. No, I met his eyes, steady, unmoved. I'm choosing truth over manipulation. And that was the moment the family broke. Not when the money disappeared, not when the lies started, but when I stopped accepting them, because silence protects the wrong people. And I had been silent for far too long. That morning, I didn't just lock my accounts, I locked something else. Access, control, permission. And for the first time in 18 months, I wasn't the one being used. I was the one preparing. Because what they didn't understand yet, what they were about to learn the hard way, was that I wasn't reacting anymore. I was documenting, I was calculating, and I was just getting started. 18 months earlier, none of this looked like betrayal. It looked like love. I remember the day the money hit my account. A Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, still in work clothes, laptop open, half focused on emails I didn't really care about. And then the notification, a wire transfer confirmation. The sale had closed. For a second, I just stared at the number. It didn't feel real, not because it was unbelievable, but because it was mine, not inherited, not gifted. Not lucky, earned, years of late nights, missed weekends, calculated risks, and finally something solid. It wasn't private jet money, it wasn't generational wealth, but it was enough to breathe, enough to plan. Enough to finally feel like I wasn't just surviving, I was building. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly in front of me. Chicago glowing like it always did, indifferent to everything except motion. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Control. Every dollar had a place. Every account had a purpose. Emergency fund. Investment portfolio. Down payment savings. Order, structure, clarity. I didn't know it then, but that was the last night everything belonged only to me. Because a week later, Victoria called. She didn't ease into it. She never did. We're engaged. Her voice was breathless, excited, victorious, and despite everything, I smiled. Congratulations. Then Ethan came on the line, smooth, confident, exactly how he always sounded. We're thinking Napa, he said. Vineyard ceremony, something elegant? Elegant, I didn't respond right away because my brain did what it always did. It calculated venue, catering, flights, guest accommodations, designer dress, honeymoon. Elegant was expensive. But I didn't say that out loud because that wasn't my role, not yet. A week later, we celebrated. A high-end steakhouse downtown, candles flickering, wine flowing, Victoria glowing across the table like she had already stepped into the life she imagined. Her ring caught every light, every angle, every glance. Ethan handled the rest. He charmed the waiter, charmed my parents, charmed the room. He talked about opportunities, timing, market positioning, but never specifics. And somehow no one asked for them. My father nodded like everything made sense. My mother looked at Victoria like she had won something, and I sat there watching, listening, calculating. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. What's the budget? Victoria waved it off instantly. It'll work itself out. Ethan smiled, that same calm, controlled smile. We're building a life, he said. You can't nickel and dime vision. Vision. I took a sip of wine and said nothing. Because something about that answer didn't sit right, but discomfort is easy to ignore when it's wrapped in celebration. 2 weeks later, she called again. This time she was crying. Our lease is ending sooner than we thought, she said. The landlord sold the building? I leaned against my kitchen counter, already knowing what was coming. We just need a place for a little while, she continued. 3 months, max, just until after the wedding. 3 months, temporary. Defined, contained. Behind her, I could hear Ethan. It would really help us stabilize, he added. We don't want to rush into another lease before the wedding. That word again, stabilize. That night my parents called. You have the space, my father said. It's practical. Family supports family, my mother added gently. You've done so well, now it's your sister's turn. I stood in my kitchen, looking around, the marble countertops I chose. The furniture I paid for, the quiet I protected, my routine, my space, my control, and for a moment I hesitated. But hesitation doesn't always look like doubt, sometimes it looks like kindness. Okay, I said, 3 months. Victoria screamed with excitement. You're the best, and I didn't correct her, because I still believed that's what I was being. Good, supportive, a sister. I didn't know that yes was the most expensive word I would ever say. Moving day came fast, too fast. Suitcases, garment bags, boxes, endless wedding binders, more things than 2 people should logically have for a temporary stay. Ethan brought whiskey, expensive, unnecessary. For the house, he said with a grin, the house, I noticed it. But I let it go, because at first it almost felt fun. Energy filled the condo. Fabric samples draped over chairs. Venue photos spread across my dining table. Victoria moved through the space like she already owned it, describing floral arches. String quartets, perfect lighting. Ethan paced constantly. Phone glued to his ear, negotiating, closing, planning. I tried to treat it like background noise, temporary chaos, a phase, and for a while it worked. Until the first ask. It came casually, like all important things do. We're just short on the venue deposit, Victoria said one evening. Sitting across from me at the kitchen island. 5,000, she added quickly. We'll pay it back after the wedding gifts come in. 5,000, not small, but not impossible. Temporary, I transferred it from a secondary account. One I barely used. Victoria hugged me like I had saved her life. And for a moment, it felt good, helpful, needed. That was the hook. Because a few days later came the second ask. This would just make things easier, she said, smiling. Careful, why don't we create shared access to a wedding account? Just so we can track everything transparently. Transparent. It sounded responsible, organized, safe, and I believed her. I opened a sub-account under my main bank profile. Set limits, defined restrictions, explained everything clearly. This is temporary, I said. Of course, she replied without hesitation. That night, 2 small notifications appeared. Charges under $100, vendor verification. Ethan explained it easily. They test before charging full amounts. It made sense on paper. Weeks passed. The charges increased. Gradually, quietly, wine tasting events. Dress alterations. Luxury vehicle rentals. Each one explainable, each one justifiable. Until they weren't. One night at dinner, I asked carefully, do we really need this level of spending? Victoria's smile tightened. It's once in a lifetime. Ethan leaned back, relaxed, confident. You've got this covered, right? Covered, that word again. I hadn't agreed to cover anything. I had agreed to help. There's a difference. But I didn't say it, not yet. Because something had already started shifting and I hadn't fully seen it. Not until that night. 2:14 a.m. my phone lit up. Crypto transfer? $7,500. My chest tightened instantly. I got up. Walked into the kitchen. Ethan was already there. Laptop open, charts glowing across the screen. He didn't look surprised to see me. It's arbitrage, he said calmly. Short-term opportunity? You used the wedding account. It's all connected, he replied. Connected, that word didn't sit right, not anymore. The next morning I asked for invoices, access. Clarity. Victoria reacted immediately. Do you think we're stealing from you? Stealing. I never said that word, but she did. And that was the moment something shifted inside me because accusations don't come from nowhere. They come from awareness. That night my mother called. You're making your sister feel humiliated. Humiliated, that word again. And suddenly the pattern started forming. Concern for her, correction for me. I lay in bed that night in the guest room that used to be my office and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. You're overthinking. You're stressed. You don't understand. If I doubted myself, they gained control. And slowly I was starting to 3 months passed, then 4, then 6, and no one talked about moving out, not once. My master bedroom became her bridal suite, my clothes boxed, my space reassigned, my home rebranded. And I let it happen because I kept telling myself the same lie: it's temporary. But temporary was already over. I just hadn't admitted it yet. By month 4, something changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. So quietly that if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have missed it completely. Victoria stopped saying "your account." She started calling it the wedding account. The shift was subtle, almost harmless, just words. But words shape ownership, and ownership shapes behavior. Because after that, Ethan stopped asking before logging in, not gradually, not awkwardly, naturally, like it belonged to him. I would walk past the kitchen and see my bank dashboard open on his laptop. Numbers moving, transactions updating, my accounts displayed like a shared resource. And every time I noticed it, I told myself the same thing. You set limits, you built safeguards, you're in control, but control doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes, slowly, one decision at a time. Work didn't help. The firm was pushing harder than usual. Deadlines stacked, clients demanding. Late nights turned into early mornings. And when I came home, the condo wasn't quiet anymore. Music, laughter, champagne corks popping, wedding talk everywhere. It was easier to ignore small discomforts than start a fight I didn't have the energy for. So I didn't, and that was mistake number 2, because the spending changed, not just in amount but in intention. Wine tasting for 20 guests became a private vineyard experience. A simple dress fitting became designer alterations. Car rentals became luxury SUVs. Extended, upgraded, every upgrade came with the same justification: it's once in a lifetime. And every time I questioned it, Victoria didn't argue. She reframed: "You're being negative. You don't understand the vision. You're stressing yourself out." And Ethan, he didn't argue either, he reinforced: "You've got this covered, right?" That phrase again, covered. It stopped sounding like a question and started sounding like an assumption. One night I stayed up late. Alone, laptop open, transaction history pulled up. I wasn't planning to investigate, I just wanted clarity, a quick review. Something simple, but numbers don't lie. And what I saw didn't feel simple. $28,000 in 6 months, more than double what I had mentally tracked. That was the first moment my chest tightened, not from stress, but from awareness. Because there were entries that didn't make sense, transfers routed through third-party processors, charges labeled with names I didn't recognize. One in particular stood out: Emerald Coast Consulting, $8,200. I paused, opened a new tab, searched the name. Nothing, no business registration, no website, no LinkedIn presence. It didn't exist. When I asked Ethan about it later, he didn't hesitate. "Private contractor," he said. "Destination coordination?" Smooth, immediate, too smooth. Victoria didn't even look up from her phone. "Why are you auditing your own sister?" Auditing, another word I hadn't used. But now they were using it for me, framing me. Rigid, suspicious, cold. That night I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there in the guest room, my office turned storage space, and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. The words, the tone, the patterns. "You're overthinking. You're stressed. You don't understand." It wasn't random, it was consistent, and consistency is never accidental. At 2 a.m. I checked the account again, another crypto transfer, smaller this time, but there. Always there, and then I saw something new: a pending request, external account linking. The name attached to wasn't Victoria's, it was Ethan's. I stared at the screen for a long time, because that wasn't a mistake, that was escalation. They had reached the limit, and they were trying to expand it. That was the moment everything shifted. Because until then, I had been asking one question: are they being careless? But now there was a different one: are they doing this on purpose? And once that question exists, you can't unsee anything. The next morning, I didn't confront them, not yet, because confrontation without proof is just emotion, and emotion is easy to dismiss, so I did something different. I started documenting, screenshots, timestamps, exports, every transaction, every pattern, every inconsistency. I didn't accuse, I observed, because observation builds something stronger than anger, it builds evidence. Weeks passed. And the numbers didn't slow down, they accelerated. $48,000, then $60,000, then $70,000. The total moved faster than the conversations. And the conversations, they didn't change. You're overreacting. You're making this negative. You're stressing everyone out. The narrative stayed the same because the narrative was part of the plan. I saw it clearly the night of the family dinner, relatives visiting, laughter filling the table. Victoria smiling, relaxed, confident. She forgets to eat when she's stressed, she said casually. People laughed. Ethan added, she isolates herself too much. Concern flickered across faces, small, subtle, but real. And that's when I understood. They weren't just managing money, they were managing perception, planting ideas, building a version of me that I didn't recognize, unstable, overworked, detached. Because if that version existed, then anything they did would seem justified. That night, I checked the account again, $80,000, and then I saw it. A new charge, professional evaluation services. $4,200. Category medical consulting. My stomach tightened. There had been no appointments, no visits, no discussions, and 2 days later another charge, legal document preparation. $2,100. I didn't need confirmation anymore. I needed clarity. The next morning I left for work early. Halfway to the elevator, I realized I forgot my charger. I turned back, quietly. And as I reached the door, I heard voices. Victoria's voice, low, careful. He doesn't think she'll fight it. Silence. Then Ethan, too quiet to catch clearly. And then Victoria again, she hates conflict. My hand froze on the door. Once it's signed, she said, she won't even know what she agreed to. Silence. I didn't open the door, I didn't confront them. I stepped back, because in that moment everything became clear. This wasn't spending. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't even manipulation, it was planning. And for the first time since they moved in, I wasn't confused. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was alert, because now I wasn't asking what was happening, I knew. And they had made one critical mistake. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought I hated conflict. They thought my calm was weakness. They were wrong. That night I sat at my desk, took out a blank page, and drew 2 columns. On one side, what they have, access, narrative, assumed trust. On the other, what I have, ownership, records, time. And for the first time, I smiled, because they thought they were building leverage, but they weren't. They were building evidence. And I was done being the last person to see it. By month 10, I stopped correcting people. When they referred to the condo as Victoria and Ethan's place, I let it slide, not because it didn't bother me, but because correction was no longer the goal. Understanding was, and by then, I understood everything. The social shift had already happened. Vendors came and went without asking me. Caterers used my kitchen like it was theirs. Bridesmaids walked through my living room like I was the guest. One afternoon, I came home early. The door was unlocked. Music was playing. Laughter echoed down the hallway, and when I stepped inside, the conversation paused. Not completely. Just enough. One of her friends looked at me, smiled politely, and said, "Hey, can you grab more ice?" In my own house. I didn't respond. I walked to the freezer, took out the ice, placed it on the counter, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't accidental, this was complete. Ownership had already shifted everywhere except legally, and that was the only part that still mattered. That night, I opened the transaction logs again, $98,000. The number didn't shock me anymore. It confirmed something, a pattern, because patterns don't lie. And then I saw something new, a recurring charge, harbor lock storage. Monthly, I paused, searched the address, high security storage facility. Climate controlled, private access, not for decorations, for documents. I didn't ask, not yet, because I already knew something was wrong. I just needed to prove it. The next morning I waited, watched, observed their routine. Victoria left mid-morning, florist meeting. Ethan followed shortly after, phone call, business. The condo went silent. For the first time in months, it felt like mine again. I walked slowly down the hallway, past the living room, past the dining table, into what used to be my bedroom. Her vanity drawer was slightly open, just enough. I stood there for a moment, not hesitating, calculating, because once you cross a line like this, you don't come back from it. Then I opened it. Inside, a manila folder, neatly placed, too neatly, like something meant to be hidden but accessed often. I pulled it out, opened it, and everything stopped. Power of attorney draft, my name at the top. A signature at the bottom, not mine. My fingers tightened around the paper. I kept going. Application to add Victoria as co-owner of my condo. Email threads back and forth between Victoria, Ethan, and a lawyer, Marcus Feldman. Certain phrases repeated: temporary financial oversight, stress-related instability, joint living arrangement justification. My vision blurred for a second, then sharpened, because now there was no doubt this wasn't about a wedding. This was about control, total control. I turned the page, more documents, medical consulting references, psychiatric evaluation notes, not real, not completed, prepared, planned, structured. If Isabella shows resistance, psychiatric evaluation may support temporary guardianship. The words sat there, cold, legal, final. They weren't just trying to take money, they were trying to take authority over me, over my life, over everything I had built. And suddenly, every conversation made sense. Every comment about stress, every joke about burnout, every concerned look at family dinners. It wasn't concern, it was groundwork. They were building a version of me that could be legally controlled. I kept flipping pages. Storage unit receipts, registered under Ethan's name. Purpose, document security, not decorations, evidence, leverage. And then at the very back, a handwritten note, Ethan's handwriting. She trusts family. Pause, don't push too hard. Another line, after the wedding it's easier. Easier, meaning after legal ties, after assets merged. After everything looked legitimate, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my bed, and for the first time I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel hurt. I felt something else. Clear, because clarity doesn't come with emotion, it comes with understanding. And now I understood everything. My phone vibrated. Another notification, $12,000 transfer attempt. Emerald Coast Consulting. Pending, waiting for authorization. They had reached the limit. They were pushing again. And now I knew why. I took my phone out and started taking photos. Every document, every page, every signature, every email, front, back, close up, timestamps, headers. I didn't rush, I didn't panic, because panic makes mistakes. And I couldn't afford mistakes. Not anymore. When I was done, I placed everything back, exactly how I found it, drawer slightly open, folder aligned, no trace. Then I walked to the bathroom, turned on the sink, and washed my hands. Not because they were dirty, but because touching those documents felt like touching something contaminated. That evening, everything was normal. Victoria smiled. You seem calmer, she said. Ethan watched me carefully. I'm glad you're not overthinking things anymore. I smiled back. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't questioning. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was preparing because they thought they were ahead. They thought I was still confused, still emotional, still controllable. They had no idea that everything had already changed. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was stressed, because I was planning. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and built something new, a timeline, every transaction, every document, every conversation, connected, aligned, structured, not as a victim, as evidence. Because this wasn't personal anymore, it was legal, and legal doesn't care about emotions. It cares about proof, and now I had it. I leaned back in my chair, looked around the condo, the noise, the laughter, the illusion, all of it about to collapse, because they made one final mistake. They thought silence meant ignorance. They thought calm meant weakness. They thought patience meant permission. They were wrong, because silence can also be strategy, and strategy, when documented, becomes power. The morning after I found the folder, I stopped pretending. No more waiting, no more observing, no more giving them time to finish their plan, because now I understood something clearly. If they acted first, I would be defending myself. But if I acted first, I controlled everything. So I woke up before dawn. The condo was quiet, for once. No music, no voices, no footsteps that didn't belong to me, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels precise. I sat at the kitchen island, opened my laptop, and began. Savings account, locked. Primary checking, locked. Brokerage portfolio, secured. The sub-account, the one they had renamed the wedding account? I didn't hesitate. Restricted, revoked, disconnected. Every shared permission removed. Every external wallet cut off. Every digital door closed, not emotionally, precisely. Because this wasn't anger, this was correction. At 7:43 a.m., I called my bank. I need to report potential financial exploitation. The tone on the other end changed immediately. Calm, structured, serious. They asked for details, dates, Amounts, authorization history, I gave them everything. $120,000, 18 months, repeated crypto transfers, third-party routing, unauthorized linking attempts. There was a pause. Then we're opening a case. A case? The word settled in my chest, not heavy, solid. After the call, I placed a full credit freeze. No new accounts, no inquiries, no exploratory applications. Nothing moved it without me. Then I contacted building management. I need to update access permissions. They pulled up the records, primary resident me, secondary access, Ethan, temporary, revoke it. There was a pause. Is there a dispute? I didn't hesitate. There won't be for long. By 9 a.m., everything had changed. They just didn't know it yet. Victoria woke up first. I can't access the account. Her voice carried from the bedroom. Confused, I didn't turn around. I restricted permissions. Silence, then footsteps, fast. You can't just do that. I looked at her calmly. I can. Ethan appeared behind her, already alert, already calculating. Why are you escalating this? He asked. I'm not escalating. I met his eyes. I'm securing. His jaw tightened. The yacht deposit bounced, he said. The venue called. I tilted my head slightly. Why were you attempting a $15,000 transfer without my authorization? Silence. Victoria's face flushed. We needed to move quickly. You needed to ask. My phone rang. My mother, I let it ring. Within an hour, they were all at my door. My father walked in first, rigid, controlled. What is this nonsense? You locked everything. My mother followed. Victoria is hysterical. I didn't respond. I walked to the table, placed a single sheet of paper in front of them. Transaction summary. Total $120,000. Do you know how much has been withdrawn? They stared at it. That can't be accurate, my father said. It is. Victoria crossed her arms, defensive. You agreed to support us? I agreed to limited access. Ethan stepped forward. You're making this about control. I held his gaze. I am making it about control. Pause. Mine. The room shifted, not emotionally, structurally. Because for the first time, they weren't debating the money. They were realizing they didn't have access anymore. My father exhaled slowly. You're overreacting? I shook my head. I'm responding. At that moment, my phone rang again, the bank. I answered. The compliance officer spoke clearly. Several transactions have been flagged for irregular routing. One vendor has no valid registration. We may require additional documentation. I glanced at Ethan. Of course, I said. Then I hung up. Victoria's voice trembled. You reported us? I reported suspicious transactions. You're humiliating me before my wedding? I met her eyes. I'm protecting my assets. Ethan stepped closer. You can't prove intent. I didn't blink. I don't need to. Pause. I have documentation. That afternoon, after they left, I finalized the demand letter, 30 days, full repayment, or civil litigation, fraud. Identity misrepresentation? I printed it, placed it in a folder, and waited because timing matters. At 5:30 p.m., I logged in again, another attempt. $12,000. Emerald Coast Consulting declined automatically. Secondary access suspended. My phone exploded. Calls, messages, voicemails. You ruined my wedding. Fix this. What are you doing to this family? I didn't respond. Because by then, this wasn't a conversation, it was an outcome. At 6:15, the pounding started. Loud, aggressive, desperate, I opened the door. Victoria stormed in. You did this? Ethan behind her, pale, focused. My parents followed. The scene felt familiar, like something I had already lived. Because I walked to the table, placed the full stack of documents in front of them. 67 pages, every transaction highlighted, organized. $120,000. Silence, heavy, final. Victoria flipped through them. This isn't what it looks like, then explain it. I flipped to the first page. Emerald Coast Consulting? No answer. Next page. Crypto transfers? Nothing. Final document. Power of attorney draft? My father's hand trembled. You were going to file guardianship. Victoria shook her head rapidly. It was precautionary against what? Silence. Ethan looked down. I held his gaze. I never lost control. Pause. I was generous. Victoria's voice broke. You're destroying everything. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm stopping it. My father stepped forward. You're choosing money over blood. I met his eyes, steady. Unmoved, I'm choosing boundaries over manipulation. I placed the demand letter on the table. You have 30 days, my mother gasped. You'd sue your own sister? Yes, the word didn't shake, because for the first time it wasn't emotional. It was necessary. The room felt smaller, tighter, different, because the narrative had changed. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore, it was documented. After they left, the condo fell silent. Finally, I gathered the papers. Placed them in a folder, walked down the hallway, into the master bedroom. My bedroom, I opened the closet. My side was still empty. Boxes stacked, but it felt different now, not taken, reclaimed. I sat on the edge of the bed. Exhaled slowly. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought stability meant tolerance. They thought calm meant compliance. They were wrong because discipline is not weakness, it's control. And control, when taken back, doesn't explode, it locks. I looked out at the skyline, the same view, the same city, but everything felt different. 18 months ago, I said yes because I believed something simple: family means trust. Now I understood something better. Trust without boundaries is exposure. And exposure, when paired with forged signatures and $120,000 missing, isn't a misunderstanding. It's a case. In this time, I wasn't asking permission to protect what was mine. I already had. The lock had already happened.